Welcome to Out and About. In today's program, we speak to Chinese artist and activist Ai Weiwei. Welcome
Hi.
to the program. So you received the Frank-Schirrmacher Prize in Zurich this week, and Swiss businessman, collector and diplomat Uli Sieg said at the event that you are uncompromising and relentless when it comes to defending your values. And you jumped in and said, "You mean my prize?" So besides being one of the greatest human rights activists and contemporary artists, do you consider yourself a good businessman too?
I consider myself a good businessman. I think the ultimate businessman is not to talk about business, but the values around the business. So in that sense, I'm top businessman.
Because when you talk about your values, the business comes automatically?
I think yes. I think we all, as human, are behaving leading to very practical reasons, and the philosophy of why we have to make a business and what kind of business we prefer or we defending or we make an effort, it's always need to be answered.
Mm-hmm. And when Uli Sieg was ambassador to China, you tried to sell him some art. And at the time, he was very surprised how cheap it was. And it was the first time he had to bargain the price up. So I wonder, have you gotten better in selling your art?
Selling art is very strange business because the value of art is very hard to determine. You know, why we put a certain price on Jack Matty or some other artworks. And it's cannot be clearly rationalized. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I don't really care about the price. It flows with the, with the river or whatever.
But you still have a lot of staff to pay. I know that you have a big staff that sometimes works on your artworks, so you have to pay them as well. So I guess you can know how many costs you have. And
yes, exactly. My tactic is I first created a problem. It's always my tactics. You settle yourself with a set of problems. Mm-hmm. Then you start to find solutions. Mm-hmm. And I have been lucky. I did make a lot of problems, and I quite successfully settled them, or still make sure I can meet the target. So.
Okay, so I guess you said you're lucky. I would say your art commands higher prices now. Does this translate into more freedom for you? Because then you can fund your art or your activism.
Yes and no. And I think we're born as a free person. That we have to stand. We have to really understand that
you have
point.
To fight for it, to keep it.
Yes, and to maintain that little freedom, it takes a lifetime effort. And of course, price are numbers. And doesn't mean anything. Your real value is only be measured of how you spend those money. It could be a penny, or it could be millions or billions. But the spending is the art. And, I think so.
So one of your current projects is filming a documentary in Hong Kong about the protests. And you sent a team there. How many people?
We have a team, about 5 or 6 people over there for past 100 days. Projects like this, we have not just one, we have 5 ongoing. And never have a clear business plan because you never know what is going to end up, when it's going to be finished and what will be cost. So that is a lot of money.
And who funds that? Who funds that? Do you have
I fund myself because that's a challenge I don't want to give to anybody else. That's the only pleasure I would have to suffer, from bleeding. If you see a real me, is a lot of wounds, bleeding all the time. But that gave me pleasure. I want to have the independent making, which means nobody tells me what to do or not to do. That's so-called freedom. But of course, you make effort. I invest all my money in production.
For your last documentary, Human Flow, about the global refugee crisis, you had the support of Amazon Studios. Were they backing that movie? So not from the beginning, or you financed it yourself first and then they backed it up?
Very clear. And I'm very lucky when you have a good project, really someone would jump in and, the participant is the company in the United States. They under a Swiss company.
Which Swiss company?
Called AC, which is Andy Cohen, who very generously, before they say what I'm doing, they believe if Ai Weiwei focused on the refugee situation, they put quite impressive money into it. It gave us a great freedom to shooting in 23 nations, 40 camps, and this is very important.
Okay. And what are the tasks of your people in Hong Kong right now? What are they filming?
What happens in Hong Kong, it's historical. It's not just young students from Hong Kong, but it reflects the very ultimate struggle between China and the West. And we see the development in China is impressive, but same times, in many ways, it's not mature, it's premature. So they have to answer very basic questions in terms to make the competition with the other nations or in global situation. So Hong Kong reflects that conflicts.
And your team is interviewing the students and the police as well, and the police's wives.
Yes, we are trying to have a much, we have time, and we're trying to get very balanced view about what the Hong Kong's struggle is about. They call them revolution, which has a very fresh character of the new type of uprising, and the Hong Kong students are very creative.
So you were one of the directors of the movie I Love Berlin, but when the movie was released this year, your part was missing. And you said this was self-censorship by the producers because they wanted to do a project in China and because they were afraid of including your part because of your political status. And plus, it would make it hard for them to secure more funding. So I wonder, has anyone else tried to distance themselves from your work because of fear of antagonizing China?
Oh, that happens daily. This is not new to me. I'm an artist, have most museum shows, and every museum are living and depend on
money from
big
China?
Companies, not money from China, but the big companies who is also invest in China. Those companies would censor themselves when they get involvement with my art exhibitions. We often have zero funding for my shows. The museum have to solve it, and I have to help them to solve it only because the companies say my name in the exhibition.
Oh, wow. So they try to find someone else to back it, or you say...
Yeah, and we have to finance it, and also we have to do many other possibilities, sell products, and to fund.
Cross-fund. So when you say we, you have an own company, your studio?
No, I have a studio, which is a registered company, but I say we means the museum and our studio.
Okay. Then this year, 8 artists asked for their work to be removed from the Whitney Biennale as they found out that the then vice chairman of the board owned companies that manufacture tear gas, which was used at the U.S. border against migrants. So you being an activist artist, are you mindful of who buys your art and where they got their money from?
I try not to know it. This raises a lot of questions. Where you show your work and who you associate with, Of course, if I know it, I have to make a clear decisions. And if I don't know it, I just pretend I didn't see it. But seriously, every artist have a responsibility to about what they're making and where to show it, but who to sell to. This is a capitalism society. If you're being so precise, maybe you only make it work for yourself. So.
And maybe do you wish that your artwork at the place of a person that has maybe a strange background, maybe, it can change something? It's
challenging. There are certain venues or certain buyers, we clearly know that we refused. Even they pay very high price. They said, there's no ceiling for the price, but can you work with us?
Yeah.
We said no, because it's clearly we cannot do it.
Can you give us a concrete example?
I cannot name the names, but it's top financial institution. And I really thought why they have to have me there, because they have a very difficult moment trying to establish some kind of cultural identity. So that's certainly against my will to be associated with certain very, I would not say uncomfortable, but even illegal activities.
You have done art for high-end department stores such as Le Bon Marché, that belongs to Bernard Arnault, CEO of luxury brand LVMH in Paris in 2016. And there were some critics saying that you're doing art for the rich people that pays well. I guess every artist needs to do that. Nevertheless, what would you say to these critics?
I welcome all the critics. I think that raise questions. I'm not only doing works for the so-called department store, but also I do works for jail, jailmates, and I do works for refugees. I think we cannot just separate ourselves from the society with some kind of high moral standard, but we, as artists, to involve, to put yourself in the question and to challenge the common conclusion. I think it's also important.
And it also reminded me of Ordos. Ordos is a ghost city in China that was constructed out of nothing, and you created. It's a long time ago.
I think besides you, not so many people remembers that.
I wanted to travel there, actually.
Yeah, it's a dead city.
Yeah,
it's a city, typical city. Planted by central government or local government, but it made such big splash, but ended up like a ruin. It's nothing.
Like a ghost city.
Not happened. That's part of the reason I decided not to do architecture in China anymore, because architecture is very political in every city in the West or in China, especially in China. You can never really control it.
Because it's by the state, right?
Yeah, you don't know the reason they will have it and why. You only place very small segment in there, and you don't know when they will stop.
I would like to speak about another topic. You left China in 2015, is that correct?
Yes.
And you moved to Berlin, and this year you moved out of Germany because you were disappointed, and you said Germany is not an open society. So I was wondering, what is an open society then, if Germany isn't?
It's a good question. I think, or the question rather, if there is a open society ever exists. But the question remains, every society is always protected by its own language, own culture, and own, habit. Or culture is some kind of habit. So it's very hard to say which one is really totally open, because we are protected by our weakness, or we are protected by our limitation. Every society the same. So, but as an artist or as someone who always trying to make argument or questioning or conditions, it's important for me, myself to get involved. And if I feel there's no need for my involvement, or it's very exclusive for that, I would leave. It's not a place for me.
And you left to Great Britain. Is it any better?
I left not for a better place, but for more argument maybe. And Britain, in one way, are less aggressive in terms of to defend themselves. They have endless argument, and of course it confuses themselves. But I still feel
with Brexit.
I still think, and I never really make a better decision, but I make a decision which is clear related to the condition.
Maybe one more question, looking at the U.S. trade war, U.S.-China trade war, and someone that knows both worlds. You lived over 40 years in China, about 9 years in the U.S. What would it need for both sides to find an agreement, or is it hopeless?
I think it's a very interesting moment. The trade war started as a trade war, but will not end up as a trade war. It opened the whole era about
ideology
and business partners or relationship between West and China. And as we all know, China a fast-growing society, but basically the fast-growing is created by the West, by the demanding of the Europe and the U.S. want to enjoy the globalization. So China becomes the most ideal society to be as a partner, with it very bad human rights record, very low sense of humanity or freedom of speech or independent judicial system. All those become an advantage for the West to explore China. This is a fact. And now West feels threatened because China still plays the same. It never changes its ideology. They're very steady. They are very strategically planted, and they have a clear vision. They will overpass, become the biggest nation and the most influential globally, because they have global view and thinking. They are developing in the Africa, South America. They have a long time plan, which none of the Western cities have this kind of plan, because your capitalism. You're leading by the profit, by a free economy. But China is not. China is a state capitalism. They have a clear strategy, and they're not necessarily gained by immediate gaining. They don't have to read the monthly report or annually report, So in that, the West will lose the competition for sure. So how to establish more reliable, trustful relations for them to dealing with China is become a very, very crucial question. And still they haven't got the answer yet. And you see the West are very divided. Each nation has their own behaving toward China. Switzerland, Germany, Italy, or France or England, they all behave very differently, but they are one thing the same. They want to be profited. And China see it very clearly. So they can dealing with them very smart way.
Okay. Well, Ai Weiwei, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and for being here.
Thank you for asking those questions. It's very pleasant to talk with you.
Thank you.